Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating question in the AI world. What does it actually mean for an AI to possess a real skill? You hear the word all the time, right? An AI finishes a task, remembers what worked, and does it again next time. But today, we're going to look closely at how an AI actually transforms a lucky, one-time success into a rock-solid, reusable capability without falling into what we call the verbatim trap. Okay, let's dive right into this. It's incredibly tempting to think that if an AI system can just memorize a prompt and regurgitate it exactly as it was originally executed, well, it must have learned something, right? But is repeating an action verbatim truly a skill? We often kind of confuse a system's ability to just recite a previously successful sequence with actual true intelligence. But as we're going to see, relying on that rote verbatim repetition, that's actually a massive structural weakness. It's definitely not a sign of real learning. So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to unpack the illusion of skill, define the anatomy of a real capability, look at the very real dangers of automating mistakes, outline the complete skill lifecycle, and finally explore how all of this drives true intelligence. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The illusion of skill, or as I like to call it, the verbatim trap.
You know, the simple word skill actually hides some very different mechanisms. Under the energetic paradigm, a real AI skill is strictly defined as a controlled operational structure. It's not just a stored prompt. It's not a quick instruction. It actually requires the system to know when to act, how to verify the results, and crucially, when to avoid using that method entirely. A single successful result is never ever enough to get a pass into an AI skill library. Why? Because that original success might have relied on hidden, totally unrepeatable circumstances. If you're just capturing the verbatim output of one good run, you don't have a skill. What you have is a historical artifact. Think of it like a student who memorized the exact answers to a math test versus one who actually learned the core formulas. On one side, a memorized pattern just shatters under variation. It relies entirely on exact inputs to recite its pattern verbatim. But on the flip side, a truly transferable skill survives partial information. It adapts to changing environments, and perhaps most importantly, it fails in recognizable, safe ways. A real skill is a transferable capability that survives unexpected interference. A verbatim memory that just breaks the second the environment shifts. Section 2. Anatomy of a real skill. Building the module. Now, what's really interesting is how we shift from this theory into actual architecture. An AI absolutely shouldn't store a procedure just because it got a positive outcome once. To be a real skill, it needs to satisfy 5 specific conditions. Step 1 is purpose. The system has to know exactly what problem the skill is meant to solve. Step 2, activation conditions. Basically, what evidence is needed before we trigger this. Step 3 is resource cost. How much time or compute is this going to eat up? Because a skill that works but bankrupts your compute budget, not useful. Step 4 is verification. How do we check the result and know what kind of error is actually acceptable? And finally, step 5, the failure boundary. What happens when the procedure hits a weird, unfamiliar case? Does it just stop? Does it ask a human for help? Framing skills through this clean, 5-step structured module is exactly how we prevent those blind verbatim habits from taking root in the system. Section 3. When AI automates mistakes. The pathology of habits. So this brings us to some massive structural dangers that self-improving agents face when a weak procedure is just allowed to spread without those 5 strict boundaries we just talked about. Imagine an agent that makes its own skills without proper verification. It uses a flawed verbatim shortcut over and over, just because it worked once. Suddenly, that reusable module becomes part of the default workflow. That generates more outputs, and those outputs provide false evidence to the system that the skill is highly useful purely because it's commonly used. Notice the real danger here. Frequency begins to look like validity. This is exactly how a localized mistake blindly scales up into a default workflow, totally tricking the AI into believing a bad habit is actually a reliable skill. There's this fantastic quote from our source material that perfectly relates this AI pathology to something we are all way too familiar with, and that's human corporate bureaucracy. Think about human organizations for a second. Someone creates a temporary workaround, a verbatim script just to get past a specific bug. But suddenly, it becomes standard procedure. It gets embedded in training manuals, people do it because it's official, and eventually, literally no one remembers why it was created in the first place. The organization just keeps reproducing the behavior long after the original conditions are gone. Well, an AI skill system can develop this exact same pathology, but at a vastly accelerated speed.
Section 4. The complete skill lifecycle. Managing the library.
To prevent that kind of bureaucratic bloat, robust skill accumulation has to be really carefully managed, so the whole system doesn't just collapse under its own weight. A mature skill architecture, it needs 5 distinct operations. It should create skills, absolutely, but it also has to test them, compare competing skills against one another, revise them when conditions change, and ultimately remove them. This lifecycle is what transforms loose, verbatim prompts into verified, solid operational structures. So the crucial point is that skill retirement is just as important as skill acquisition. The system absolutely must be able to detect when a skill has become obsolete, or maybe it's too narrow, or even structurally harmful. Without a dedicated process for retirement to balance out the acquisition side, the system just hoards procedures indefinitely. And more skills create massive routing complexity. That complexity, it creates endless opportunities for incorrect activations. So your AI might get a much larger library, but it becomes far, far less stable. Section 5. Intelligence beyond mere skills. The ultimate goal. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate goal we're striving for. Look at the balance required here. A system state with no skills just wastes effort, repeatedly discovering the exact same solutions from scratch. But on the other extreme, a system governed by fixed skills, just running memorized verbatim procedures, becomes entirely rigid and completely unable to adapt. The sweet spot is that bottom scenario, controlled reuse. The goal isn't maximum skill accumulation. It's about preserving successful structure while retaining the AI's capacity for fresh, dynamic reasoning. Which perfectly summarizes our core thesis today. Storing procedures is relatively easy. A system can easily remember what it did, but skills without the strict boundaries, conditions, and lifecycle management we discussed? Those are just remembered behaviors. It's the structure, the purpose, the verification, the failure boundaries that actually transforms them from temporary verbatim successes into real components of durable intelligence. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. As you look at the systems you're using or building, ask yourself, is your AI truly building durable intelligence, or is it just efficiently automating its past mistakes verbatim? Understanding that difference is absolutely the key to unlocking real capability. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking the hard questions and keep learning.